On the 6th of March 1944, at altitudes approaching 28,000 feet above Berlin, pilots from the United States Army Air Force's 56th Fighter Group participated in what military historians would later classify as one of the largest aerial engagements yet recorded over the European continent. The mission represented a bomber escort operation targeting industrial facilities within the German capital, and the fighter combat that developed during this mission would demonstrate a fundamental shift in tactical capabilities that German Luftwaffe intelligence had not anticipated. Throughout the engagement, American pilots flying Republic P-47 Thunderbolt aircraft observed German fighter pilots executing what had become their standard defensive procedure when pressed by pursuing Allied fighters. Luftwaffe pilots would transition from level flight into steep climbing maneuvers using superior rate of climb to break contact with American escorts. This tactical approach had proven consistently effective throughout 1943. The P-47 Thunderbolt, despite its powerful Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engine, producing 2,000 horsepower, had demonstrated inadequate climbing performance when attempting to follow German Messerschmitt Bf 109 or Focke-Wulf FW-190 fighters into vertical flight profiles. On this March morning, however, German pilots discovered that their established escape procedure no longer functioned as expected. American Thunderbolts maintained pursuit through climbing maneuvers that should have left them falling behind at low airspeeds and high altitudes. At flight regimes where both aircraft types approach stall speeds near 28,000 feet, P-47 pilots achieved firing solutions on German aircraft. Combat reports from the mission documented multiple Luftwaffe fighters trailing smoke and pilots abandoning disabled aircraft by parachute. The 56th Fighter Group's official records credited 11 German aircraft destroyed during the engagement, with no corresponding Thunderbolt losses recorded. The transformation in American fighter performance resulted from a technical modification to the Thunderbolt's propeller assembly. Engineering changes implemented during late 1943 had addressed the aircraft's most significant performance limitation and altered the tactical equation governing fighter combat over occupied Europe. This is the documented history of how American aviation industry identified a critical deficiency in frontline equipment, developed competing solutions, implemented modifications at industrial scale, and deployed improved aircraft in time to influence the strategic air campaign's outcome. If you appreciate detailed, evidence-based examinations of World War II military history, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment indicating where you're watching from. We'd like to know our audience's geographic distribution. The Republic Aviation Corporation's P-47 Thunderbolt entered operational service with the United States Army Air Force's 8th Air Force in England during spring 1943. The aircraft represented the heaviest single-engine fighter then in production for any combatant nation, with gross weight exceeding 13,000 pounds when fully loaded with ammunition and fuel. Design philosophy emphasized rugged construction, heavy armament consisting of 8 50-caliber machine guns, and the powerful Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp 18-cylinder radial engine. Initial combat operations revealed significant performance limitations. Declassified combat reports from 8th Air Force fighter groups documented consistent patterns in engagement outcomes when American pilots encountered Luftwaffe fighters. German pilots flying Messerschmitt Bf 109G or Focke-Wulf FW-190A aircraft routinely escaped from combat situations by executing climbing maneuvers. P-47 pilots attempting to maintain pursuit found their aircraft unable to match the climb rates achieved by German fighters. Technical analysis conducted at Republic Aviation's facilities in Farmingdale, Long Island, identified the propeller as the primary limiting factor. Early production P-47 aircraft were equipped with Curtiss electric narrow-blade propellers featuring relatively thin blade profiles optimized for high-speed cruise efficiency. These propellers functioned effectively at velocities exceeding 350 miles per hour, where narrow blade cross-sections minimized aerodynamic drag. However, during climbing flight at lower airspeeds with engines operating at maximum power settings, the narrow blade configuration could not efficiently convert available horsepower into thrust. The fundamental aerodynamic principle involved propeller blade area and its relationship to thrust generation at varying airspeeds. Propellers function by accelerating air rearward, with thrust produced as the reaction force. At high forward velocities, relatively small blade areas can accelerate sufficient air mass to produce required thrust. At low air speeds during climbs, larger blade surface areas are necessary to interact with adequate air volume. The narrow blade propellers, fitted to initial P-47 production aircraft, operated inefficiently during climb conditions, with engines reaching maximum RPM limits while producing insufficient thrust for competitive climb performance. Combat reports filed by 8th Air Force squadrons throughout summer and fall 1943 consistently documented tactical consequences of this performance limitation. German fighter pilots understood American escort fighters' weakness and exploited it systematically. Luftwaffe tactical doctrine specified that when engaged by superior numbers of American fighters, pilots should attack bomber formations, then disengage by transitioning to maximum rate climbs. Pursuing P-47s could not maintain contact, allowing German pilots to break off combat at will. The presence of fresh bananas at Camp Algona in January 1945 reflected American wartime agricultural and logistical capabilities that far exceeded German comprehension. United States Department of Agriculture statistics from 1945 indicate that despite wartime demands, American civilian and military food supplies remained abundant throughout the conflict. Banana imports to the United States actually increased during the war years. According to Commerce Department trade statistics, the U.S. imported approximately 2.3 million tons of bananas in 1944 compared to 2.1 million tons in 1939. Primary sources included Honduras, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama, and Colombia. The United Fruit Company and Standard Fruit Company maintained regular shipping schedules throughout the war, despite German U-boat operations in the Caribbean and Atlantic. The U.S. military prioritized POW nutrition under Geneva Convention requirements. War Department General Order 45, issued in July 1943, mandated that prisoner rations meet or exceed minimum nutritional standards equivalent to those provided to American military personnel. This policy was not purely humanitarian. It also served strategic purposes by encouraging enemy soldiers to surrender and by demonstrating American adherence to international law. Camp Algona, established in 1943 on 125 acres in northern Iowa, was specifically designed to house German prisoners of war captured during North African and European campaigns. The facility eventually housed over 10,000 German POWs, making it one of the largest POW installations in the American Midwest. The camp operated under command of the Army Service Forces and was administered by the 133rd Service Unit. Quartermaster Corps records indicate Camp Algona received weekly food deliveries from regional suppliers. Fresh produce came primarily from Des Moines distribution centers, which consolidated agricultural products from Iowa farms and coordinated with national food distribution networks. Bananas arrived from New Orleans, transported by refrigerated rail cars that maintained temperatures between 56 and 58 degrees Fahrenheit to prevent premature ripening or cold damage. The camp's mess operations were supervised by trained military cooks, primarily soldiers, who had completed quartermaster school training at Fort Lee, Virginia, or Camp Lee, Virginia. These cooks understood basic nutrition principles and were instructed to provide balanced meals incorporating proteins, carbohydrates, and fruits or vegetables at each service. Samuel Washington, designated in military records as Cook First Class Personnel File 19432088, had been assigned to Camp Algona in April 1944. Washington, age 32, was an African-American soldier from Georgia who had worked in civilian restaurant kitchens before his induction in 1943. His personnel evaluations consistently rated him as excellent in food preparation and prisoner relations. Washington's decision to order bananas for German prisoners was not unusual. Army regulations required varied menus, and tropical fruits were readily available through military supply channels. However, Washington's persistence in continuing banana orders after the initial rejection demonstrated understanding of human psychology beyond standard military protocols. Camp Algona administrative logs document that bananas appeared on prisoner breakfast menus 3 times weekly, starting January 8, 1945. Initial consumption rates among female prisoners were approximately 25%, meaning only 3 of 12 prisoners regularly consumed their banana portions during the first week. The breakthrough came during the second week of banana service. Prisoner 4478F, Liesel Wagner, noticed variation in banana appearance between successive meals. Some bananas exhibited minimal brown speckling on their peels, while others showed extensive brown spotting. Wagner observed that American mess personnel showed equal willingness to consume both varieties, suggesting the brown spots did not indicate spoilage. German food preservation traditions emphasized consuming fruits at peak freshness before any visible deterioration occurred. Brown spots on German apples or pears typically indicated the fruit was past optimal consumption time and should be processed immediately into preserves or baked goods. Wagner's observation that Americans deliberately ate extensively spotted bananas challenged these assumptions. On January 18th, according to mess hall reports, Wagner conducted what could be termed an informal experiment. She selected a heavily spotted banana, peeled it following the technique Corporal Fletcher had demonstrated, and consumed a small portion. Post-war interviews indicate she found this banana significantly more palatable than the minimally spotted banana she had tried during the first breakfast service. The heavily spotted banana exhibited higher sugar content and softer texture due to advanced ripening. Banana ripening is a well-documented biochemical process. As bananas mature, starches convert to simple sugars, primarily fructose and glucose, increasing sweetness. Simultaneously, the fruit's pectin structures break down, creating softer texture. Brown spots on banana peels indicate areas where polyphenol oxidase enzymes have created melanin compounds. These are harmless and actually correlate with increased sweetness. Wagner shared her discovery with other prisoners in Germany. By January 22nd, mess logs indicate 7 of 12 female prisoners regularly consumed their banana portions. By January 28th, 10 of 12 prisoners ate bananas consistently. Only 2 prisoners, including prisoner 4457F Helga Schmidt, maintained absolute refusal. This learning process followed predictable patterns documented in cross-cultural food adoption studies. Initial rejection based on unfamiliarity gives way to gradual acceptance when 1. The food is presented repeatedly without coercion. 2. Trusted peers model consumption. 3. Individuals discover personal preferences within the food category. And 4. Positive associations develop through pleasant experiences. Prisoner Greta Hoffmann, identified in records as having education background and leadership qualities, played a significant role in encouraging other prisoners to attempt banana consumption. Her approach, according to witness statements, emphasized treating bananas as a learning opportunity rather than as imposed foreign food. She encouraged prisoners to experiment with ripeness levels and consumption methods. By February 1945, bananas had become integrated into the female prisoners' daily routine at Camp Algona. Prisoner correspondence, which was monitored and partially preserved in military archives, indicates the women began describing bananas in letters to family members in Germany. Prisoner 4469F, Margaret Klein, wrote to her sister in Bavaria on February 12, 1945. The letter, translated from German and preserved in declassified records, stated, "We receive here a yellow fruit called banana, sweet as honey, which grows in jungles across the ocean. Such things exist even in our captivity." This letter exemplifies how prisoners processed their experiences, acknowledging captivity while also recognizing unexpected elements of their situation. The women developed informal banana trading economies within their prisoner group. Those who preferred additional protein portions at breakfast would trade their banana allocation to prisoners who favored fruit. These trades were conducted voluntarily and created social bonds through reciprocal exchange. When new prisoners arrived at Camp Algona, typically in groups of 10 to 20 women transferred from other facilities, the established prisoners took responsibility for banana education. This represented significant social development. Prisoners who had initially been confused and frightened now served as cultural interpreters, teaching newcomers about American food practices. Prisoner 4478F Liesel Wagner emerged as the informal banana expert within the female prisoner population. Her role was documented in camp social reports prepared by military welfare officers. Wagner demonstrated peeling techniques, explained ripeness indicators, and encouraged gradual adoption. This teaching role provided Wagner with purpose and status within the prisoner community. The prisoners developed several banana consumption methods beyond eating the fruit plain. Some prisoners sliced bananas into the oatmeal provided at breakfast, allowing the fruit to warm and soften further while sweetening the cereal. Prisoner 4465F, Anna Schultz, developed a method of mashing overripe bananas with forks and spreading the paste on bread, creating a sweet sandwich. These innovations represented creative adaptation, taking an unfamiliar food and incorporating it into familiar eating patterns. The banana-oatmeal combination drew on German breakfast traditions of warm cereal, while the banana spread echoed fruit preserve spreads common in German households before wartime shortages. Camp Algona's prisoner photography records include an image dated March 8, 1945, showing 12 female prisoners at their breakfast table, each holding partially consumed bananas. The photograph was intended for military documentation of prisoner welfare, but captures genuine cultural transformation. Faces in the image show concentration, casual consumption, and comfort, not the confusion visible in verbal descriptions from January. On April 15, 1945, a severe late-season blizzard struck northern Iowa. National Weather Service historical records indicate the storm deposited 14 inches of snow across Kossuth County and created wind gusts exceeding 50 miles per hour. Highway departments declared roads impassable for 3 days. Camp Algona supply logs document that the weekly delivery from Des Moines, scheduled for April 16th, was delayed until April 19th. The delivery truck, loaded with fresh produce, including approximately 200 pounds of bananas intended for the entire camp population, remained stranded 70 miles south of the facility. Mess operations continued using stored provisions, canned vegetables, dried goods, frozen meats, and shelf-stable items. However, fresh fruits were depleted by April 17th. That morning's breakfast service included eggs, toast, and canned peaches, but no bananas. Prisoner reactions, documented in daily camp reports, indicated disappointment disproportionate to the actual nutritional impact. Bananas represented approximately 100 calories of a 2,000-calorie daily ration, nutritionally minor. However, their psychological and cultural significance had become substantial. On April 17th, only 8 bananas remained in camp storage for the 12 female prisoners. The women voluntarily implemented a sharing system, cutting 4 bananas in half to ensure equal distribution. This decision was made collectively, without intervention from camp administrators. Prisoner 4463F, Greta Hoffman, played a leadership role in organizing the sharing system. Her approach emphasized fairness and mutual support, principles that strengthened prisoner solidarity. This incident demonstrated how food scarcity, even minor and temporary, could either fragment or unify a community depending on leadership and social cohesion. By April 18th, no bananas remained. The women consumed standard breakfast rations, but mess supervisors noted unusual quietness and reduced interaction during the meal service. The absence of bananas had become noticeable not through complaints, but through atmospheric change. During this period, prisoner 42469F Margaret Klein developed influenza symptoms common in the camp during April 1945. Medical logs indicate she experienced fever reaching 101.5 degrees Fahrenheit, body aches, and fatigue. Camp Medical Officer Captain Robert Anderson examined Klein and prescribed standard treatment: bed rest, increased fluid intake, and aspirin for fever reduction. Klein's illness coincided with the banana shortage. According to witness statements from other prisoners, Klein expressed desire for a banana while confined to her bunk. She specifically described wanting a ripe banana, emphasizing the sweetness and texture she had learned to appreciate. This request revealed how completely the women's attitudes had transformed, from initial rejection to active craving during temporary unavailability. Samuel Washington, the Camp Algona cook responsible for prisoner meals, learned of Margaret Klein's request through Corporal James Fletcher. Washington's response demonstrated initiative beyond standard military duties. Washington searched camp pantry storage and located dried banana chips from a previous shipment. These chips, produced through dehydration processes that removed approximately 95% of water content, bore minimal resemblance to fresh bananas in appearance or texture. However, they retained banana flavor compounds, primarily isoamyl acetate, which gives bananas their characteristic sweet aroma. On the evening of April 18th, Washington reconstituted approximately 2 ounces of banana chips by soaking them in warm water mixed with honey and cinnamon. This process partially restored softness, while the honey and cinnamon enhanced sweetness and added aromatic complexity. The result was not comparable to fresh bananas, but carried recognizable banana flavor. Washington personally delivered this preparation to the female prisoner barracks, a violation of standard protocol, which prohibited non-essential contact between military personnel and prisoners. However, Washington's action was consistent with broader military policy, emphasizing humane treatment of POWs under Geneva Conventions. Prisoner 4463F Greta Hoffman accepted the bowl at the barracks entrance. According to her post-war testimony, she immediately understood the significance of Washington's gesture. He had invested personal time and creativity to address a prisoner's specific request during illness. This action transcended the impersonal nature of standard military prisoner administration. Margaret Klein's reaction was documented in multiple prisoner statements. Despite her fever and general malaise, Klein consumed the reconstituted banana mixture with visible emotional response. Fellow prisoners reported Klein wept while eating, not from distress, but from the unexpected kindness represented by Washington's effort. This incident spread rapidly through prisoner communications networks. By the following morning, according to camp reports, all female prisoners were aware that an American cook had personally responded to a sick German prisoner's food request. The symbolic weight of this action was substantial. It demonstrated individual human concern transcending the formal enemy classification. Roads reopened on April 19th, and supply deliveries resumed. The April 22nd delivery included 200 pounds of standard Cavendish bananas, restoring normal provision levels. Female prisoner breakfast service on April 23rd included fresh bananas, which were consumed with documented appreciation. Prisoner 4469F, Margaret Klein, had recovered from influenza by April 24th. Her first post-illness breakfast included a banana, which she consumed slowly while discussing with other prisoners how temporary deprivation had intensified her appreciation for the fruit. In early May 1945, Camp Algona received a shipment including red bananas, a different variety than the standard yellow Cavendish type. Red bananas, primarily grown in Central America and East Africa, have reddish-purple peels, when ripe and slightly sweeter flavor, with hints of berry notes. They are smaller than Cavendish bananas, typically measuring 4 to 6 inches in length. The red bananas created renewed confusion among prisoners who had just become comfortable with yellow bananas. Mess hall reports from May 4th indicate prisoners initially questioned whether the red-skinned fruits were actually bananas or some different food altogether. Corporal Fletcher provided clarification. These were simply a different banana variety, equally edible, prepared the same way. Prisoner 4478F, Liesel Wagner, leveraging her established reputation as the banana expert, volunteered to try the red variety first. Her assessment, that red bananas were sweeter and creamier than yellow bananas, encouraged others to experiment. This incident created spirited debates among prisoners about banana variety preferences. Some prisoners maintained loyalty to yellow Cavendish bananas, citing their firmer texture and less intense sweetness. Others preferred red bananas for their increased sweetness and creamy consistency. These debates, trivial in content, provided prisoners with normal social interaction, temporarily obscuring their captivity circumstances. On May 8, 1945, Germany signed unconditional surrender documents at Allied headquarters in Reims, France. The surrender became effective at 11:01 p.m. Central European Time. News reached Camp Algona within hours through military communications channels. Camp administrators assembled all prisoners on May 8th to announce Germany's surrender. Prisoner reactions documented in camp psychological reports varied widely. Some prisoners expressed relief that combat had ended and casualties would cease. Others demonstrated grief over Germany's defeat and concern about their homeland's future. Many prisoners exhibited anxiety about when and how they would return to Germany and what conditions they would find. The female prisoner group experienced these mixed emotions collectively. Evening of May 8th was characterized by subdued conversations, crying, and general emotional distress. Prisoners faced profound uncertainty. Their country had been defeated, their families' situations were unknown, and their own futures remained unclear. Samuel Washington responded to this emotional crisis by ensuring the May 9th breakfast service included abundant, fresh bananas. Each prisoner received 2 bananas instead of the standard single fruit. Washington arranged them on plates with evident care, creating a small visual statement of continuity amid upheaval. Prisoner 4463F, Greta Hoffman, recognized Washington's gesture immediately. According to multiple witness accounts, Hoffman stood during breakfast service, raised her water glass, and delivered a brief speech in English. Her statement, recorded in camp reports, acknowledged Washington's consistent kindness throughout the prisoners' time at Camp Algona and expressed appreciation for small dignities maintained even during profound historical transition. The female prisoners collectively participated in this informal toast, including prisoner 4457F, Helga Schmidt, who had maintained absolute refusal to eat bananas throughout her entire imprisonment. Schmidt's participation in the toast, despite her banana aversion, indicated she understood the gesture's symbolic, rather than culinary significance. This moment represented a culmination of the transformation these prisoners had experienced. 4 months earlier, they had viewed bananas as incomprehensible alien objects. Now, in the aftermath of their nation's defeat, bananas represented continuity, kindness, and the possibility that human decency could survive catastrophic circumstances. German POW repatriation from American camps began in mid-1945 and continued through 1946. Prisoners were processed through classification procedures, screened for war crimes involvement, and eventually returned to Germany in groups organized by geographical origin. The 12 female prisoners at Camp Algona were repatriated between July and September 1945. Military records indicate they were transferred to East Coast processing facilities, where they underwent medical examinations and security interviews before boarding transport ships to European ports. Post-war interviews conducted with several prisoners in the 1950s and 1960s provide insight into how they processed their Camp Algona experiences. Multiple prisoners mentioned the banana incident as significant in their memories, not because of the fruit itself, but because it represented a broader experience of encountering American abundance, adapting to unfamiliar circumstances, and receiving unexpected kindness from individuals they had been conditioned to view as enemies. Prisoner 4478F, Liesel Wagner, returned to Bavaria and eventually emigrated to the United States in 1952. In a 1967 interview with military historians studying POW experiences, Wagner stated that her Camp Algona time, particularly the banana learning process, taught her that fear of unfamiliar things often stemmed from lack of exposure rather than actual threat. She credited this lesson with giving her courage to emigrate to a country she had once viewed as entirely foreign. Prisoner 4463F, Greta Hoffman, returned to Hamburg and resumed teaching in the 1950s after Germany's reconstruction. In correspondence preserved in German education archives, Hoffman described using the banana story in her classroom to teach students about cultural differences and the importance of approaching unfamiliar things with curiosity rather than fear. The banana incident at Camp Algona, while minor in military significance, offers insight into several important historical dimensions. First, it illustrates the vast economic disparities between the United States and Germany during World War II. American prisoners of war, even while captive, had access to imported tropical fruits that German civilians had not seen for years. Second, it demonstrates the power of small cultural exchanges in humanizing enemy combatants. The American soldiers who patiently taught German prisoners about bananas, and the cook who went beyond requirements to provide comfort food to a sick prisoner, engaged in acts of individual kindness that transcended political and military antagonism. Third, it reveals human adaptability. The prisoners moved from complete confusion to comfortable familiarity with bananas within weeks, demonstrating that cultural barriers, while real, are not insurmountable when approached with openness and patience. Finally, it highlights the psychological importance of food beyond nutrition. The bananas became symbols of normalcy, small pleasures in difficult circumstances, and evidence that some human kindnesses persist even during total war. Camp Algona was deactivated in 1946. The facility's buildings were gradually demolished or converted to civilian use. Today, the site houses a POW museum dedicated to preserving the camp's history and the experiences of the thousands of German prisoners who passed through northern Iowa during World War II. Among the museum's collection are photographs of prisoners, administrative documents, and personal artifacts. The banana story, while initially seeming trivial, has become one of the museum's most popular exhibits, precisely because it captures human dimensions of wartime captivity that massive troop movements and strategic decisions obscure. For those 12 German women who sat at breakfast in January 1945, staring at yellow curved objects they could not identify, the banana became more than food. It became education, comfort, community, and ultimately, a reminder that even in war's darkest periods, small moments of connection and understanding can bridge seemingly unbridgeable divides. The full strategic impact of paddle blade Thunderbolts became evident during preparation for Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy. Throughout May 1944, American and British air forces conducted intensive operations aimed at achieving complete air superiority over invasion areas. Fighter groups ranged across northern France, attacking German airfields, destroying aircraft on the ground, and engaging any Luftwaffe fighters that attempted to interfere. Paddle-blade-equipped P-47s proved especially effective during these fighter sweeps. When German fighters scrambled to intercept, they typically climbed from lower altitudes to reach American formations operating at 20 to 25,000 feet. Thunderbolts could dive on these climbing German fighters, attack, then climb away before targets could retaliate, reversing the tactical situation that had prevailed during 1943. On June 6, 1944, as Allied ground forces assaulted Normandy beaches, Thunderbolts provided continuous air cover throughout the invasion day. German fighters that attempted to attack the invasion fleet or support German ground forces were consistently intercepted and destroyed by American fighters. Luftwaffe units managed fewer than 100 sorties over the invasion beaches during the critical first 24 hours. American fighters flew more than 8,700 sorties during the same period. This overwhelming air superiority was achievable because American fighters achieved kill ratios exceeding 4-to-1. Paddle blade propellers, by eliminating the Thunderbolt's primary performance weakness, contributed directly to establishing the air dominance that enabled invasion operations. Statistical analysis supports observations from combat operations. During first quarter 1944, before paddle blade propellers achieved widespread deployment, American fighters in European theater achieved overall kill ratios of approximately 1.8-to-1 against German fighters. By second quarter 1944, with most American P-47 groups equipped with paddle blade propellers, kill ratios improved to 3.2-to-1. By third quarter, exchange ratios reached 4.6-to-1. These improvements cannot be attributed solely to propeller modifications. American numerical superiority increased throughout 1944. Pilot training programs improved. Germany fielded progressively less experienced pilots as veteran aviators were killed and training programs compressed. However, combat reports consistently documented that improved climbing performance played significant roles in achieved victories. The manufacturing effort required to equip American P-47 fighter groups with paddle blade propellers demonstrated United States industrial capacity operating at effective scale. Both Curtiss-Wright Corporation and Hamilton Standard Division produced thousands of propeller assemblies between June 1943 and December 1944. Each propeller consisted of 4 blades, hub assembly, pitch control mechanism, and mounting hardware. Individual blades were forged from aluminum alloy stock, then machined to precise airfoil cross-sections. Heat treatment processes increased material strength to withstand operational loads, including centrifugal forces at maximum RPM, aerodynamic loads during maximum power operations, and vibration stresses throughout service life. Manufacturing documentation indicated each blade required approximately 14 hours of machine time, not including raw material preparation and finishing operations. Hub assemblies incorporated sophisticated mechanical or hydraulic systems for rotating blades to control pitch angle and therefore engine RPM. These mechanisms required precise manufacturing tolerances to ensure reliable operation through temperature extremes from -40 degrees Fahrenheit at altitude to +120 degrees during ground operations in summer conditions. Quality control procedures involve detailed inspection and testing of all components. Blades were X-rayed to detect internal defects. Hub assemblies underwent pressure testing to verify seal integrity. Completed propeller assemblies were spin tested to verify balance and detect any vibration anomalies before release for installation on aircraft. Logistical challenges involved transporting thousands of propellers across the Atlantic to England for retrofit installations. Each assembly weighed approximately 650 pounds and required careful handling to prevent damage during shipping. Propellers were packed in wooden crates with protective bracing and transported on cargo vessels. Atlantic crossing typically required 2 weeks. Upon arrival in England, propellers were distributed to air depot facilities where mechanics installed them on aircraft. Between January and June 1944, air depot personnel in England retrofitted over 1,000 Thunderbolts while maintaining operational readiness of frontline fighter groups. This represented remarkable logistical achievement given competing demands for maintenance capacity to support ongoing combat operations. German fighter pilots who survived the war consistently identified paddle blade-equipped Thunderbolts as among the most capable American fighters they encountered. Major Günther Roll, who survived with 275 credited victories primarily on the Eastern Front, but also flew combat missions against Western allies, noted in post-war interviews that improved Thunderbolts were substantially more dangerous than earlier versions. Roll stated German pilots learned to treat paddle blade Thunderbolts with the same tactical respect accorded to P-51 Mustangs, recognizing the American fighter could match German performance in most combat situations. This represented significant shift from earlier attitudes where German pilots had considered Thunderbolts inferior in nearly all performance categories except diving speed and structural strength. German aircraft designers possessed technical knowledge to create similar propeller improvements for Luftwaffe fighters. Both Messerschmitt and Focke-Wulf employed experienced propeller engineers who understood theoretical benefits of increased blade area for low-speed thrust production. However, German war economy in 1944 could not support rapid modification programs of the scale implemented by American industry. German aircraft production operated at maximum capacity, focused on producing existing designs in sufficient quantities to replace combat losses. Introducing new propeller designs would require retooling production lines, recertifying aircraft performance characteristics, updating maintenance documentation, and training mechanics in new installation procedures. Production disruption would cost thousands of fighters during period when Germany desperately needed every aircraft to defend against increasing Allied bombing campaign. Germany faced impossible strategic situation. They needed to match American technical improvements, but could not afford the production disruption required to implement modifications. This highlighted fundamental differences between American and German approaches to aircraft development during war's later stages. Lessons learned from paddle blade propeller program influenced American aircraft development throughout the war's remainder. Rapid development and deployment demonstrated incremental improvements to existing aircraft could often provide superior value compared to developing entirely new types requiring years to reach operational status. The P-47 itself benefited from continued improvements beyond propeller modifications. engineers developed water methanol injection systems that increased Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine power output to 2,535 horsepower for short periods. Combined with paddle blade propellers' improved thrust characteristics, this further enhanced performance. The P-47M variant, introduced in late 1944, incorporated both water methanol injection and paddle blade propellers. This configuration could achieve climb rates matching or exceeding any German fighter type then operational. Maximum speed increased to approximately 470 miles per hour at optimal altitude, making P-47M one of the fastest piston-engine fighters to achieve operational status during World War II. Financial investment required to develop and deploy paddle blade propellers was modest compared to operational benefits achieved. Development costs for both Curtiss-Wright and Hamilton Standard propeller designs, including wind tunnel testing, prototype construction and flight testing, totaled approximately $3 million according to Army Air Force's procurement records. By comparison, developing an entirely new fighter aircraft would have cost at least $100 million and required 2 to 3 years before reaching operational units. The paddle blade propeller represented exactly the type of cost-effective improvement that characterized American industrial approach to military equipment development. Rather than pursuing theoretical perfection requiring extended development time, American engineers implemented good enough solutions that addressed immediate operational requirements and could be manufactured at scale. Final major air combat involving large numbers of paddle blade Thunderbolts occurred during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 and January 1945. When German ground forces launched surprise offensive through the Ardennes region on December 16th, adverse weather initially prevented effective air operations. Low clouds and poor visibility grounded most Allied aircraft during the offensive's first week. Weather cleared on December 23rd. Allied air forces launched massive attacks against German ground forces and supply lines. Paddle blade-equipped Thunderbolts flew hundreds of sorties daily, attacking German armor, trucks, artillery positions, and troop concentrations. The Luftwaffe attempted to interfere with these ground attack operations, but was consistently driven off by escorting P-47s. By February 1945, organized Luftwaffe resistance over Western Europe had effectively ceased. German fighter units were being withdrawn to defend Germany's interior against increasing Allied strategic bombing campaign. Paddle blade Thunderbolts had played significant roles in achieving this air superiority, though their contribution was subsequently overshadowed by more glamorous reputation of P-51 Mustangs, which achieved greater recognition in popular history. Between January and December 1944, Thunderbolts were credited with destroying 3,082 German aircraft in aerial combat, while losing 824 P-47s to all causes in European theater, according to 8th Air Force statistical summaries. This represented overall kill ratio of 3.7 to 1, comparable to or exceeding performance of other American fighter types during the same period. More importantly, the Thunderbolt's transformation from mediocre climber to capable vertical fighter occurred during the period when such capability was most critically needed. During early 1944, German fighter forces still represented formidable threats, capable of inflicting significant losses on Allied bomber formations. Improved American fighter performance contributed directly to achieving air superiority that made strategic bombing campaign effective and ground invasion feasible. Post-war fate of paddle blade Thunderbolts reveals how quickly wartime innovations can be forgotten once circumstances change. As jet-powered fighters entered service during late 1940s, propeller-driven P-47s rapidly became obsolete. Most surviving Thunderbolts were scrapped or sold to foreign air forces. Technical achievements that made paddle blade Thunderbolts effective fighters were eclipsed by revolutionary capabilities offered by jet propulsion. Few pilots who flew improved Thunderbolts in combat went on to positions where they could ensure propeller modification received appropriate historical recognition. Consequently, many popular histories of World War II air combat emphasized dramatic narratives of long-range P-51 Mustang escorts over Berlin, while giving relatively little attention to technical improvements that enabled P-47s to achieve comparable combat effectiveness. Yet paddle blade propellers represent fundamentally important category of military innovation, deserving greater recognition. The modification was not revolutionary breakthrough that changed fundamental nature of air combat. It was evolutionary improvement that took an existing platform and eliminated its most critical weakness through relatively straightforward engineering. This type of innovation, less dramatic than revolutionary new technologies but often more immediately impactful, characterized much of American military success during World War II. The ability to identify problems through analysis of combat operations, develop practical solutions, implement solutions rapidly, and deploy modifications at industrial scale gave American forces decisive advantages. Engineering principles underlying paddle blade propellers remain relevant to modern military aviation despite transition to jet propulsion. The fundamental insight that blade area must be optimized for intended operating conditions rather than theoretical maximum efficiency applies to turbine blade design, helicopter rotor development, and unmanned aerial vehicle propulsion systems. Military engineers still face challenges of balancing multiple performance requirements across different flight regimes. German perspective on paddle blade Thunderbolts provides sobering lessons about consequences of industrial and strategic weakness. German engineers understood propeller theory as thoroughly as American counterparts. German aircraft factories were capable of producing improved propellers had they been provided resources and opportunity. But Germany's deteriorating strategic position, resource shortages, and increasingly disrupted industrial base made rapid improvement programs impossible. Paddle blade Thunderbolt succeeded, not because American engineers possessed superior skills, but because American industry could support rapid innovation cycles, while German industry could not maintain such programs during 1944. Wars are not won by single wonder weapons or brilliant strategies or revolutionary technologies. They are won by accumulated weight of thousands of incremental improvements, each addressing specific operational problems, each implemented efficiently, each contributing to overall superiority. The paddle blade propeller was one such improvement among many. However, it came at a critical moment when German forces were still capable of contesting Allied air superiority effectively. By eliminating the Thunderbolt's primary performance weakness, the modification helped establish air dominance that made invasion of Europe feasible and accelerated Germany's defeat. This achievement, born from systematic work of propeller engineers and manufacturing workers rather than dramatic exploits of fighter pilots, deserves recognition as one of the decisive technical contributions to Allied victory in Europe. The documented history demonstrates that attention to incremental improvements in existing equipment, when executed at industrial scale with appropriate urgency, can produce strategic effects comparable to deployment of entirely new weapon systems.